In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up your map of Rwanda for export. Now, first of all, we're going to zoom out to a scale of about 1 to 250,000. So you can do that in the scale box, or you can go to the zoom button here. Let's see, that looks about right. Okay, there we go. Now, because the GIS does not contain the data but merely looks at it, we have a little bit more work to do if we want to export it. So first of all, you might want to think about if there's anything you want to add or change. Do you like what the labels look like? Do you want to change any of the colours of the vector data, the countries, the rivers, the lakes? So we also need to rename the layers that will appear in the key so that they are more easily understood. So if you go over to the layer menu, and for the Rwanda point, we're going to go to the layer menu by clicking on this Rwanda populated places layer, right click and go to rename layer, and it will give you the option to rename it. So I will name it population centers, because that's much more intelligible to the audience beyond GIS. Now if you actually go right click properties and look at the information, you will see that in fact the name of the file hasn't changed. It's still called Rwanda NE 10 meter populated places shapefile. It's only in your GIS project that the name has changed. We're going to do the same with the lakes. Again, left click, right click, rename if you're using window, lakes. And then with the rivers and lakes, right click, left click, rename rivers. There we go. And we'll rename this one countries. Left click, right click, rename layer, countries. We aren't going to rename the TIFF because we're not actually going to be including that one's file name in our legend. Okay, so now I am comfortable with how my map looks. For whatever reason, I don't need the names of rivers or countries in my particular map. You may decide that you do. I'm going to go to New Print Layout. Here it is. And I'm going to click on that. And I'm going to give my map a name. So I'm going to call that Rwanda QGIS location, because we're going to pretend this is a location map at the start of a paper or some similar document. Click OK, and you get a new window which opens up. And this is essentially the piece of paper on which your map is going to be drawn. You can see it's got measurements across the top and down the side. There are a variety of buttons. So this is how QGIS and many other GIS create a window on the data that they are projecting. They use a separate window. In ArcGIS it's sort of map view and there's paper view, but in QGIS it's a print layout. The first thing we need to do is add the data from your map to this piece of paper. And we do that using the Add Map button here. So we use the Add Map button there. And you click it, left click, you get a crosshairs, left click anywhere in the frame, drag and drop, and you can see it's now appeared in the window. But obviously it's a little bit too zoomed out for what we want. First of all, we're going to go over to these tabs here. You can see this is the map that you've added. This is the item properties tab, and this is the layout. So this is where you can sort of set the margins and the grid spacing, snap tolerance, the resolution for export. In the item properties, you can change the scale. Now that's a very kind of imprecise scale, so I'm just going to say 40, 1, 2, 3, 4, add an extra 0. Now I still think that's probably a bit too much. Right, so now I want to zoom in a little bit more because that's clearly too far out. So I'm going to cut that in half and make that a 2. And now we're getting a bit closer to what I want. This landscape is a little bit blocky, that is true, but this is perhaps more what I'm looking for my particular work. So you can see we've started to get labels that are very clearly attached to their specific points, and that's looking quite good. Now it's very helpful to choose a precise scale here, so the 2 with lots of zeros is what you want, because it will give you a better scale when you add the scale bar. This is this add scale bar button. Press it, and again you get the crosshairs. Drag and drop it where you think you would want it to go, and you see it's automatically generated. And because I've got zeros in my scale, we've got a nice 50 and 100 kilometers. Now I can adjust it. So you can see again we've added the scale bar as an item in the list. It's in kilometers, that's fine. Now you can increase the number of segments. So if I add 1 to the left, you can see there's 1 before 0, and then we've got 2. So I think 3 at 100 kilometers a unit is pretty good. You can change the number of units. Okay, so if you're in kilometers, that's up there. You can then change the number. So if I added 100 to that, you'd get double sized bars. But I think that looks pretty good. If I scroll down here, you can see I've got more options. I can add a frame if I want to. I can add a background if I want to. I can change the position and size. I can rotate it. I don't want to do any of those things. I'm very happy with it as it is. So now I'm going to go and add myself a legend. So this is the key or the legend. Again, just like the scale bar, you click on the button and then you drag and drop your legend. So I'm going to put it above my scale bar. There we go. And you can see we get a little bit of a coarse legend. We've got things in it that we don't want, such as the raster data here. And again, it's been added up here. So if I just click on that, you can see I'm going to add a title to it first. So I'm going to call mine key. Generally, they're called either key or legend. You can see that's added there. Now, it's got auto update on, and now that means that anything that you add to your layers list goes into the legend. We don't want that. We want to take that off. And that means that you have to manually add and remove the layers from your layers list to the key. I'm going to click on the raster layer. I don't particularly want to add that to my key. It doesn't tell people anything. So I'm going to click the big minus button and it disappears. Next, I think I need to move this key about, but I've got a slight problem here because I've also got a background and you've got a white box around. It looks very silly. I think the raster is light enough that this will show up perfectly well. So I'm just going to take that off, and I'm going to click anywhere else to see how it looks without the box around it. And I think that looks pretty good. So if I click on it, you can see we go back to the key. Again, there are a number of other things you can change. You could add a frame if you wanted. You can change the font. You can change the size. So I can change the size of the title. I can put it down to 14. That's quite nice. I can change the item labels to, I can put it down to 11, or I can put it back up to 12, even 13. There we go. I can change the type of font by clicking on that. But I think that looks quite clear and nice. I'm going to leave that as it is. And finally, we need to add the north arrow, and that's very, very important because you should always have a north arrow on every map you make. So you can see it. If I zoom out to a suitable scale, you can see it clearly. What we're going to add, in fact, is a picture, which is a little bit odd. Again, just like before, you add a box where you think you want to put your north arrow. And you get a choice to locate an image in the file. You have the choice between the SVG images provided by QGIS or a raster image of your own creation. So say you already had a north arrow that was the house style you needed to use, you could put on raster image and browse for it in your computer. But I want to use an SVG image. I'm going to go down to arrows. There we go. Just going to go over. And I actually really like this format. Okay. But there are lots of different ones. And you can make some changes now. So I'm going to zoom back over to that. I actually might just make my screen a bit wider, a bit narrower here, so we don't have to worry about running out of space. Okay, so I've got that one in. I'm now going to make some changes. So the stroke color is black. I'm actually going to change the fill color to black as well. So you can see it really nicely there in the image. Okay, Now I could change it to a different colour. I could make it the green to match the land, for example. I think it's a little bit too big there, so I might just shrink it down a bit. Okay. And I can, of course, rotate it if I want to. Okay. So I've got a nice little north arrow there. You can see there are lots of images you can add. So if you wanted to add a standard image, like for example, this is a typical one of a level point, ordnance datum point, for example, you can add that. They have those kinds of images in the file. Good. So we've now got a rather nice north arrow. You could add a frame, you can add a background to it. You could even add some text to it. So you can go to, this is add label. Okay, so if, for example, you did want to put just the name of Rwanda on this map, you could do it in here. I'm going to zoom right in, and I'm going to make a little box up here. And I'm going to write, you can see we've got text, lorem ipsum. I'm going to write north, a capital north. So I've got a lovely capital north there. I'm just going to shut that up a bit. I'm actually going to zoom in a bit. I'm doing that with my mouse's rolling wheel. If you want to zoom in on your image, you can use this button as we did before. I'm just going to move that up there. There we go. So it's actually positioned right above the north point of the arrow. There we are. Perfect. So you can see I've got a north point. If that's something you want, you can add that. You can add other text. As I said, you could add the name of Rwanda in the same way. Add label. Click. Position and size. OK. Lorem ipsum appears. In the properties of that, you simply delete that and write Rwanda. Now I think I'm actually going to make that capitals. And I think I'm also going to make it bigger. And I'm going to increase the font size to 16. So if you want to increase the font size, you can go to here, the drop down menu next to font, and that will increase the size of it. And then I'm just going to make the box bigger so it appears. There we go. Rwanda in there. There we go, Rwanda. So now we know that that is the country we're focusing on. And you can add the names of the lakes the same way, or the names of the countries. So if you didn't want to label them using the data in the attribute tables, this is another way to write labels. Now you can see we've got all of our items in our item list up here. And we've got a beautifully labelled map. So when you're ready, you need to export your map to a suitable format. But before you do, don't forget to save. Now this print composer will actually be saved as a print composer file on your computer. If you come back into this project, you can go to Open Print Composer and you can go back to it and edit it if you need to. So that's very useful. If you click the Export as Image, you'll get a standard dialog box. You can also print directly, or you can export as PDF or as SVG if you are using something like Inkscape to further edit your images. But I'm going to export it as an image. And you can see it's a standard dialog box. I'm going to save it as a JPEG. Okay, if I was putting it in an academic paper, I'd save it as a .tiff. That's the better format, but JPEGs are good for a lot of things, including internet files. And I've got Rwanda Kibuye location, save, and you get an export dialog box. So you've got DPI, I can increase that if I want to. It's the page width, so if you have a specification for how big your pictures need to be, you can set that either with DPI or with page width here. You could also generate a world file, so that would allow any GIS to put this TIFF back in its correct location using world coordinates. And you can crop to content. So let's say you only used a small part of the blank page. You don't want the whole blank page. You can just crop it to this outline here. I'm just going to save it like that. And it's gone. And then we'll just quickly save that again and close it. Now, supposing I want to get back to that print composer, you go to Show Layout Manager, this button up here, and you can see right away it's here, and you click Show to open it. And we're back, we can edit if we want to. Say one of your collaborators now wants you to add all the other names of all the other countries around them, you can do that easily. And we're done.